Hey everyone, Professor Apex here for Chin Track Days. Today's project is going to be on Storm Cloud. This is our 2.5 liter swapped NC Miata track car. And one of the weak links of the NC platform is actually these rear hubs on here. This was found out by some of the race teams in the MX5 Cup series here. What they were doing is it would actually break the flange there that the wheel bolts to. This typically doesn't happen on the street, but it is an issue for the track. So much so that Pirelli World Challenge actually put out a notice and allowed teams to upgrade to the heavier duty RX8 stuff. So today's project is going to cover what you need to do to put the RX8 hubs on here, and we're also going to do a wheel bearing swap as well during this. So the first step is going to remove the brake caliper, rotor, and bracket. I'm going to go ahead and leave the caliper actually mounted to the bracket itself. And we're going to just take the bracket off from the spindle. That is with a 14mm socket. Slide this off as assembly. And I'm going to hang this caliper off of a little coat hook here. Pull the rotor off, save this for later. Then we can take this axle nut off. Now the axle nut has a little spot right here that is bent over into the keyway here. So we take a little punch, a screwdriver, and knock that back out so it's square. I'm going to take our socket and impact gun, pull that off. Now one of the things that we're going to need to do, this axle is splined into the hub here, and of course over time it gets a little bit rusty, so we're going to hit it with just a little bit of our PB Blaster penetrating oil. Then we'll go ahead and move on to removing some of the other bolts that we've got on here. First we have is there's three separate tie rod ends on here. The one up top is going to be 17mm. And the two larger ones are 19mm. All of these have been soaked previously with a little bit of PB Blaster just to make sure they're easy to remove. Right back here we have one more tie rod, and this is also with a 14mm. Alright, so we removed the nut on here, and this is actually set in here, so this bolt does not pull right out, but it has to come out because there's a notch in this tie rod end. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a little plastic hammer here and knock that bolt out. You see how it's kind of got a little bit of a spline there, a knurl where it sits in there. Then we should be able to pop this arm out. Now we're going to move around to our other joints here. We have one at the bottom. These are our ball joints. This one here is not. It is 17mm as well. And we're going to attempt to unlock all of these ball joints. In order to get this ball joint separator in there, I do have to do a little distortion of the backing plate. For this purpose, it doesn't really matter because we're not going to be reusing these uprights, these knuckles anyways. And because race car, we are going to be pulling these off of the new knuckles that we're using as well. So you'll see this is the tool that I've got to pull these out. There's a couple different tools that you can get for removing these tie rods. The ones that have a little wedge or a pivot point in them. I bought one of those just for this project, and lo and behold, the jaws were not big enough to work on any of these joints. So look at that. That one's actually already out. other two are a little more difficult to get to. So go back. Slide it in. You know, if you're doing this project, you literally have 6 tie rod ends to move. You might as well go ahead and spend 20, 30 bucks and get yourself the right tool rather than trying to beat on the ends of these all the time. Another thing that I've done is this is the vehicle speed sensor, and I've gone ahead and unplugged it from up in the trunk and pulled this wire out. The sensor here likes to stick in this little slot, and the room that you have to work with here makes it difficult to get to it. Once we get the axle pulled out and get this off, then we can put a little bit of penetrating oil on it to help us get it out. And if you're just using this video for wheel bearing replacement, you can actually leave that in and not have to worry about pulling it out. See with this, where it slides into the frame here, you got these 2 little tabs. You can just push those in and pull it right out. So at this point, we've got a couple things connecting. We do still have the shock that is holding it on, which is a 19 millimeter, 17 millimeter. And that pesky axle here. So, with this axle, what we don't want to do is we don't want to smash this up and all mushroom it so that we can't use it. But if we use a little drift or punch, we can kind of get in there where we're not hurting the thread. So we can tap that out. So we've got this knuckle all disconnected from all the points here, the control arms, 5 of them, and off of the shock. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop this out of the differential here, the axle out of here. Now we can remove this whole assembly. There you go. So what we're going to do here, we're going to press this bearing out here to replace it. This is actually the RX8 knuckle that we got from Junkyard. The axles and the knuckle that we're looking for is from an automatic car, and the axles, it's a specific axle that we'll show you here later on. But what I did notice is a 2004 automatic RX8 had the right axles. A 2008 automatic did not have the right axles. So we're going to push this hub out of here. And the first thing we're going to do is we need to press this out of the bearing. And so what I got was the right size socket that fits inside the bearing but presses on the hub. And what I found out here, this is kind of an odd shape, but I was still able to get it set up in the press without any special tools other than just the blocks that it came with. It is a little tricky though. here we have the hub out, but what we'll notice is the inner race has stayed stuck to the hub. So that's okay, we can get this out here momentarily. Right. So what we're going to do is we need to get this inner race off of the hub, and it's pressed up very tight right to the hub. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a little chisel here. We're going to slide it in back and just get that bearing race started out. Then we're going to take a regular screwdriver just to pull it out just a little bit more. Okay, now we've got a little gap there. We can take it out here. We're going to use this bearing separator to get in behind that bearing. And this will give us something that we can get into the press to get a hold of this. So, first thing we have to do is there's this snap ring that goes right inside this bearing. We're going to remove that snap ring, and this bearing will push out from the backside through the front of the hub. So I have this set up here, these two plates that will rest on this face. Then I have a socket here that sits in that bearing. Just right, and then I got a couple other pieces here just to make it a little bit easier. So next what we're going to do is we're going to press this bearing back into the knuckle. And the trickiest part is right at the very start, getting it square. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of just get it started where we see that it's pretty square with our plastic mallet. Alright, so we're square, and what we found were a 4x4 rests right on this inner surface right here. And I've got this handy 76mm bearing part. I'm going to line this up with the head. Use this to take up some space. We're going to go all the way down to where this hits the shoulder on the bottom. That's it. See, we're in all the way down to where we can put the snap ring back in on that side of the bearing. So the next step is we're going to press the hub into the inner bearing race. And to do that, we need to support the back side of this bearing. So we're going to use this as a 65mm piece. We're going to use our same little makeshift garage variety stand. This is our hub. We've already put the ARP studs in here. There we go. Wheel bearings replaced. Okay, so the whole point of this upgrade is to upgrade this little piece right here. This is that rear hub. And what was happening in the MX5 Cup cars, and some other people have seen it with track cars, is this hub actually breaks off right here, snaps completely off. And then your wheel is only held on by actually the brake rotor in the caliper, which causes a pretty significant and immediate negative impact on the handling of your car. So we're going for the RX8 upgrade because these have a bigger bearing and they have a much larger surface. If you check the size of these two, we'll see this one is 42 millimeters. This one here is 45 millimeters. So a little thicker here, larger bearing. So the parts that we're looking at to make this happen, the hub here from the RX8, which can accept a larger bearing. Then we're going to the axles. And specifically what we're looking for are axles from an automatic. I would say 2004, 2005, maybe 2006. And we want the axle to have a smooth finish like this and not be the thicker, heavier axle. And what we're going to use on this axle is we're going to use this outer portion of the axle because it is larger splines. When you look at these two hubs, you'll see that the RX8 has a larger outer axle and larger splines. Right here is the MX5 version, and then this is the RX8 version. So we can take this piece off of the RX8 axle, the outer one here, and the inner spline here will fit onto the MX5 axle, thereby allowing us to use the outer stuff from the RX8. If we take a look at our hub here, all our mounting points are essentially in the same location. The only difference is right here, the vehicle speed sensor. On the MX5, it is a small hole that's designed just to fit this. So you see we have some play here. So a couple things we've got to do. The first, we need to open up this hole here to 8 millimeters or 5/16 because this bolt here is a little bit larger. The second thing we want to do is when we have this hub in there, is we want to make sure that, and this is it, that our tone ring is going to line up with our speed sensor. And you'll do that when you bolt it into place here. You can take a look and see where it shines, where it lines up on the tone wheel. And this tone wheel can actually be moved back and forth a little bit on that axle if you need to, if this is not lined up right where you want it. And then that plugs right back in the factory wiring. So I'm going to give you a couple bits of tech advice on pulling these axles apart. This is probably one of the nastiest jobs here because the grease in here gets everywhere. So the first thing is to pull these clamps off. You can use a screwdriver and a hammer. And some people will kind of go through this section here and loosen that up first, but then what happens is the clamp slides around and you can't get to the rest of it. So what I like to do is just go ahead and come in with a hammer here right at the end and just pop it right up. Now we're going to slide this up out of the way a bit. And we want to get this off. So basically this is held in there just with a spline, and there's a little circlip on the other side. So all we got to do is whack it with a hammer to take it off. Just clamp it in the vise very hard, and some people will take a lighter hammer and just hammer away on this. I prefer to take a drift, and we're going to set it right here carefully on this little bearing part here right next to the axle, and just give it one firm, and it's off. And here you can see that little clip is basically what was holding it on. And we're done. So we'll clean all this grease off of here and reassemble this. Well, actually not this axle, this is garbage. We'll reassemble the MX5 axle, MX5 inner, MX5 boots, the RX8 outer with new grease and boots. Okay, so one of the things that we're going to do as long as we're fiddling around with the axle here, so remember we're going with the MX5 inner joint, the MX5 axle, and the RX8 outer joint. So we've got them all apart. We're going to clean them all up. We're going to inspect these boots, replace the boots if they need to be replaced, and we're going to repack all this grease with some real high quality red line grease. So this upper end, what we're looking at here, this is the tulip joint, and fortunately when we reassemble this or put it back on, it only fits on one way because of the shoulder that's in there. So if you get it upside down, you can't get it in far enough to put it in wrong. So we're going to line up the splines here, slide that in, and then our next step is going to be to put the snap ring on. And our snap ring is in. There we are. I've already packed some grease in there. We're going to pack some more grease in this end as well. Terrible, terrible, nasty job. You know what? If you got a drive shafts shop locally, you can take them and have them do this for you. Have them do it for you. There we go. Okay, so clean up our grease here, and we're going to put clamp on the boot. And it's important that these clamps are very tight, because what really kills these CV joints, either the inner or the outer, is when the boot's split or the clamp's not on tight and you send the grease out and they start running without grease is when they fail. Otherwise, the darn things are very reliable and last a long time. If you happen to notice on your car that you've got any grease slinging out, be sure to fix that immediately. Especially with these axles. These are a custom axle that we have built. So this is the kind of clamp that we're going to use here, and these clamps are available on Amazon, and you can get this special little tool here which works well for tightening it. The other reason that these will fail is that they are not clamped properly, they're not tight enough, and the grease slings out, because you really can't tighten this enough just by using a pair of needle nose pliers or something like that. Just really pull it down. So we're going to go here, really squeeze it down, bend it up, and then this tool has a cutter that trims it off. We fold it over just like that, and we'll just tap these little tabs over. There we go. Now we're confident that we've got this boot on here good and tight, cleaning the excess grease off of it, and our inner joint is complete. We'll basically be repeating the same process on the other side. We'll pack the outer joint, put the boot on. One of the things in the manual it tells you to do is to put some vinyl tape over these splines, so that when you're sliding the joint, the boot on there, basically you're not going to mar up the inside of this when you slide it over. So you can slide it over, get it up to where it's supposed to go, and then remove the tape off when you reassemble. Okay, so here's a little trick that we're going to try to put the outer joint in. The inner joint had the little clip on there, which was pretty easy, just to use snap ring pliers and put it over. This one has this metal ring right here, which kind of expands when it gets in the slot. And you can see it's going to be kind of tricky to get the piece over it. So we're going to cheat here, and we're going to take a little wire tie and slide it over the ring to compress it. Then when we get this joint on for a little ways here and it's slid over the clip, we'll just remove that wire tie. Alright, we are ready for reassembly of this rear upright here. First step that we've done is we've placed the axle that we've rebuilt and slid it right into our differential. It basically just slides in. The little circlip on the end will pop into the differential there. One thing we noticed when we had this car apart is every single one of these boots was torn on the tie rod ends. So naturally, that's just a recipe for failure there. We replaced all these boots. They are all available from your local Mazda dealer. What we'll do is we'll put the part numbers for those in the comments down below. A good little hack here, sometimes you order these Mazda OEM parts online with the website, and then they charge you like this ridiculous amount of shipping for it that kind of offsets any savings. What I found is my local Mazda dealer, Cox Mazda, has those same online prices. I go right online, order the same parts, and I select in-store pickup, and I don't get charged those shipping fees there. So we've got our upright here, and what we're going to start with is the two larger ball joints right here. We're going to line them up with here. Axle in, started. Once we get those in, it's somewhat stable, and we know it's not actually going to fall down into the ground. And I'm going to go ahead and just start the nuts loosely on a couple of these. Again, so it doesn't jump off onto the floor, because if it does, it will land on my foot. 100% chance. Then we begin to tighten everything down. One of the things with these tie rod ends, they do have an Allen head right in the center. So the best tool right there, we've started to spin, is if you have a ratcheting wrench, which these are 19 millimeter, then you can put an Allen wrench in there and these will tighten down in no time. The torque specs for all of these different bolts on here are actually available online. If you Google Mellens service manual, M-E-L-L-E-N-S service manual for the 0607 Miata, see a complete PDF, has all the torque values for everything. And the next thing we're going to do, we're going to reinstall the rotor, the brake caliper. We're going to put in our speed sensor. Then we're going to go to this axle nut here. And there are some tricks to this axle nut for getting the torque done. So let me get this done, we'll be right back. Alright, so we've got the rotor on, the brake caliper on, and I went ahead and completely finished the other side of this car as well. The main reason being is we have to put the axle nut on. The axle nut takes just over 200 foot-pounds of torque. And what we need is the mechanical advantage of having the parking brake on to both sides. So an important detail here with the RX8 stuff is there is this washer that goes on this axle nut right here. Don't have washers like that on the MX5, and if you're not using that little washer, the nut will not be able to tighten down enough. So if you're going to the junkyard to get these axles and uprights here, make sure to get that washer. Unlike the ones I got, I did not get that little washer for one side and wound up having to buy one brand new from Mazda. Also, the axle nuts here are supposed to be replaced. The primary reason is because we put that little dent in right here. So I went ahead and spun that up. I have the parking brake locked as tight as it will go on both sides. We're going to go ahead, set this torque wrench to 200 foot-pounds, and torque this sucker down. With that, we are almost done. One little detail that we need to do here is we have to take this part of the nut and fold it over into the little keyway there. This prevents this nut from backing off should it come loose over time. The tool I like to use rather than a punch, because if I use a punch it kind of pokes a hole in it, is actually have a screwdriver here that is designed to beat on. It's got a flat bottom on it, and it has kind of it's not a sharp point, and that'll give me a good edge to hammer this down into the keyway. And with that, this side is complete. Just put the wheel on and we are ready to go. One minor point about the axles here. The two axles from either side of the car are different lengths here, so make sure you keep them separated which one is the right and the left side axle.